What happens now regarding your marital commitment and improving your personal development is in your hands. It is how you interact with and listen to God as you engage in this experience that determines what you'll become. Our aim is to deepen your relationship with your personal developmental coach, God. Our time together is not meant to replace the essential connections you need to cultivate within your community. Everyone needs a place where they can be themselves, be fully honest in order to receive feedback and support. You need a support group, and this isn't it. We are here to enrich your relationships by offering insights about God and life that may inspire you to break free from ambivalence, encourage you to pursue new personal challenges, and enhance your interactions with those around you while aligning with God's intentions for your life. This is more than just an informational podcast, for knowledge not grounded in human experience won't lead to change. Our podcast is designed to be interactive, as true change requires us to acknowledge our need for growth, develop new habits, and take the risk of sharing our unique journey. During this time, you will hear from us and others alternative solutions for you to consider, but it is up to you to decide what is helpful and consistent with God's will for you. The nature of our interactions doesn't allow for a truly therapeutic encounter, so what you've received needs to be viewed like the Bereans. Let's seek God together as we pray this prayer. Search me, O God, and know my heart. Test me and know my anxious thoughts. Point out anything in me that offends you, and lead me along the path of everlasting life. Welcome to our Married Well podcast. And my name is Roy Smith. I'm a psychologist, an ordained minister, and an author of several books that integrate personal development with God's Word, dealing with very practical issues. And Dean, let us know who you are.
Yes, I'm Dean Brior. I'm Development Director with the Marriage Hub, which is a crisis marriage ministry in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. I, too, am an author. I had a couple of books written a couple of years ago, and just finishing a book called Holy Moments for Busy People. So I'm praying for God to give us holy moments here. So.
That's great. Micah?
Yeah, my name is Micah. I am an outpatient therapist and our resident question asker.
And if he has too hard of questions for Dean and I, then they come back to him and he has to answer them. So it's a very fair system
I
when you
like
think
that.
about it.
Yes.
So where should we start, guys? Dean, what are you thinking about here as you work with marriages? Have anything kind of come to mind recently that caused you to kind of see um, some of the struggles marriages have?
I think some of the things I've been seeing, I currently track about 120 couples a month. I'm in contact with them either face to face through Zoom, text, emails, and I interact with them as much as they want to interact with me. Some of them weekly, some of them once a month. But every time I'm talking to a couples and I see they're doing well, I always ask them, why are you doing well? You were doing so badly 6 months ago at the retreat. We had a couple bring divorce papers to the retreat, and this is like 4 months ago now. And they were going to execute them on Monday, and on Sunday they tore the papers up in tears of just joy and forgiveness. And I've been tracking them, and they're like kids again in their mid-30s. They're happy, they laugh easily, they have this light in their life. And so I said to them, I said, what is going on? What made the difference? And they said, well, first of all, the intensive experience where the Word of God, the Spirit of God, and the people of God were on us for 3 days. We could not escape the truths that were being taught and the applications that were being demanded. They said that broke through our hard hearts. Said the second thing we learned is that we don't have a chance together unless we grow separately. When we're growing with God, we have the capacity to give each other the fruits of the Spirit in a non-selfish, sacrificial way. And so I said, tell me what that is. And this is a young guy. He listens to Alistair Begg and Charles Stanley on the way to work. What 28-year-old does that? Well, one who is desperate to know God. While we were talking, I recommended 2 books. He ordered them on Amazon while we were talking. And then it hit me. People that are committed to profound positive change, they get exactly what they want. People that are somewhat committed, they get exactly what they want. And people that are not committed, they get exactly what they want. So it would just impress me that when I want to see people change and they don't want to change, I get frustrated because I know how much they can receive if they just have the courage to surrender their ego and pride and start to grow. So that's what I've been seeing the last couple of months on couples that are making it. Every one of them had the same story. We got serious with God. And once we got serious with God, we could get serious with each other.
And it's so easy to take on a defeatist attitude, because when you do that, it leads to the self-fulfilling prophecy of things not working out. So you're guaranteed to at least be right, even if it's not the answer you want.
Yes.
And secondly, it takes the light off of who we need to become to create a better relationship for us. A lot of times we look to the other person to change, and yet at these moments, God calls each of us to lead the way to create the couple transformation that we want. And if both people stay in their safe positions in the foxhole of life, shooting volleys at someone else they see or partially see, they don't see all of them, nothing good's going to result from that kind of way of dealing with life.
Yeah, amen. And the other thing I'm noticing is that couples, we try to teach couples that this is you, okay? This is you, and this is you. And there can be nothing in between you except Jesus. He's the one that's in you and around you. And that core strands can't be broken. But what happens is they come to us and they've got kids in the middle, they've got work in the middle, they've got in-laws and outlaws in the middle, they've got health issues in the middle. And all of those are viable situations that need to be addressed, but they can be addressed outside you. This is you. Kids don't get in between you, yet we find kids in between couples all the time. Work shouldn't get in between you, yet we find people ruining their marriages because work is so stressful. And so the model we try to give people is this is you. Nothing but God gets in here. Everything else needs to be outside, and everybody needs to know where they belong. And that's a challenge for couples that are getting their self-esteem from their kids, or getting their self-esteem from their work or from their ministries even. And they let that get in between, and it starts to push a couple apart.
No, that makes sense to me. And reality is that these, what I would call interdependent issues, in-laws, finances, sexuality, how work fits in, child care, it for the marriage to grow stronger, each individual has to take ownership of their particular perspective of how they want things to work out in those areas. And a lot of times, people either don't do their homework to figure out what their individual issue is, or expect the other person to guess at it and just do
Yes.
what's right. And that always ends in a disaster. And so I have to think through, what's it like to be a parent, a good parent, and what am I trying to accomplish? and then I need to express that to my wife, and I need to then hear how she answers the same questions.
Amen. Yep, exactly right.
So, Micah, what are you thinking over there as we wait to see if anybody joins us?
Yeah. I mean, I'm just thinking of the different ways that can disrupt couples, and one of the biggest being infidelity. Infidelity in a multitude of different ways. It doesn't necessarily um, have to be external. It could be an internal way that they're struggling that causes a sort of infidelity. But I'm curious, with you guys working with couples, what are some of the most common ways that people interact with or identify with infidelity in the marriage, and how would you walk a couple through dealing with that?
You want to take a shot at that first, Dean, and then
I,
I'll go
I,
second?
I'll take a shot, and then you, doctor, can quantify, qualify, and correct me. Okay. so
No,
so
I'm
here,
going to agree and say next question.
here
That's
here's a regular Joe answering it, and then we're going to let the expert answer it. My experience with is infidelity is anything that a spouse sees as better than their spouse.
Hmm.
And whatever that is, pastors are constantly accused by their wives as having an affair with the church because they make it clear to their wife that church comes first, you come second. Other people make it clear that pornography, that sexual experience comes before their sexual experience with their wife. Others, it's work, it's play. My golfing friends come before you. Just remember that. Um, so infidelity is not just me meeting a woman having a sexual affair, cheating on my wife, hiding it from her till I get caught, and then saying I'm sorry. I mean, that is a terrible thing, but there are other terrible things we do that create an infidelity culture in our marriage where we're just basically saying to that person, there's something or somebody I find better than you. And that's what crushes the offended spouse. They're just crushed by a person saying, yeah, I married you and I said I loved you, but now I love something or somebody more than you. And that's where the real pain comes in.
I'm curious. Do you see couples identifying infidelity in that way? Is that a way that they view infidelity being, or is that something that comes through teaching and guidance?
It's interesting. Whenever we have them on the weekends, of course, the typical my husband or wife had an affair, that's infidelity.
Okay.
But then as they go through the weekend, a lot of them do realize it's easy for a pastor or workaholic to communicate to their spouse, my work or my ministry is more important than you. But we hear that word right there. Why do you feel the way you do? Because I feel like this is more important than me, or your work friends are more important than me, or your hobby is more important than me. It's the more important than me that we keep hearing that signifies there's a real problem in the marriage. And it doesn't have to be a sexual affair. It could be whatever that spouse says, I've decided is better than you.
Hmm.
that is very interesting to me, and to me, I would want to know how is that person communicating, all right, to you that you're number two in their life, and this other thing is number one. Um, because I would want to understand how does that communication occur, and how have you gone about telling them that you feel secondary to that issue, and have you asked them why is that, why is that other area of your life seem more important to me? And I think that a lot of times with that kind of interaction, some of the time the person's going to claim it isn't more important. At least they
Yes.
know that's the right answer out of the book. Okay. Um, so to hear how specifically that is measurably demonstrated is important to communicate. And then for that person to look at what are ways I can show you that you are number one. Okay. Are there areas in that I'm missing? Because a lot of times a person can come to that conclusion that they're number two, and there's possible faults in both of them. The one person can be oblivious to how work is dominating their home, and that needs to be clearly stated so that a clearer choice is made. At
Mhm.
another time, okay, it could be that I'm expecting more from you than you've told me. Okay. Or maybe I tend to think that if you don't do these things, which might be beyond what is normal, then that means I'm not number one. And so you have to break these interactions down into more of the specific parts so that it can be eventually dealt with. I say to couples, if if you if you require the man to guess, it is guaranteed for you to be disappointed. Men
Yes.
are lousy guessers, okay, and they're not going to get it right. And then I look at the woman and say, have you ever told him something that you want and him not do it? And they would say, well, let me give you the list of 700 today where I told him to do something and he didn't do it. All right. And then I say, well, therefore, he's used to not doing it. He can be ornery, correct? And they will agree with this concept and give us five more reasons why. Therefore, if you ask him to do something and he doesn't have to guess to do it, and he did it, and you know he didn't want to do it, okay, doesn't he get maximum credit for that because you've told him 80 other things he didn't want to do and didn't do? And once we get, a lot of men need clarity on the hill to climb. And sadly, we may actually need someone to tell us which steps are which to kind of get us there. All right. But once that's clearly stated, all right, then the man has to take ownership. I made choices that I made them number two. All right. And then the next question comes up. All right. And the next question is, well, how do you feel when she makes you number two? All right. If you're saying I can see where she can prove measurably that she's number two, how do you feel about you being number two? Now, the interesting thing about this is a lot of times, if we're honest, we want to play an unfair game. All right. We want us to be treated number one, and we want them to accept a worse deal than we would ever accept ourselves. They're supposed to see that work is important. They're
Yes.
supposed to love us, to know work is important. And now they're going to agree that they can be number two because I guess we're so special. All right. And it's interesting to me because both the man and the woman want life to be fair, and nobody's going to choose to be involved long in an unfair game. We're going to quit the game. We're not going to involve ourselves if one person gets to dominate and the other person not. And sadly, a lot of times in marriages, that's what's expected, that one person expects the other person to have everything their way instead of it being fair. Now, what's a fair game? All right. A fair game is, unless it's particularly skilled, each person has the choice to win and lose half of the arguments. All right. Now, none of us would play a game or argue with somebody long if 95% of the time we lost the argument. We would eventually just want to tune them out and walk away. And so what we have to do is look at those negotiations and take ownership to make sure they're fair.
Roy,
Much better answer than me. Thank you.
would you say
Oh,
that part of infidelity is trying to work through a power struggle?
I think infidelity is caused by a number of different reasons.
Okay.
All right. You have I'm making this up.
Okay.
All right. You have what we call simplistic infidelity. All right. And again, even that word was just made up. All right. And simplistic infidelity is a sexually motivated encounter where an individual wasn't thinking through the implications of their actions and it was fairly impulsive in nature, meaning that they had compartmentalized their sexual expression away from the whole rest of who they are from an identity perspective. And so thus it was almost the sexuality was almost an impersonal form of sexuality. And and as a result, they often don't think about the implications of that. All right. And some folks get into a routine of simplistic sexual affairs, infidelity, whereby it can be different people, and it's kind of motivated by a compulsive sexuality that just basically says, "I love my wife, and here's what I do here," and then over here in this other compartment, okay, I act in a way that is not fair to my wife. I wouldn't necessarily want the same thing, and I block it off. And if that person to do that happens to be a believer, and I ran a sex addiction group for 25 to 30 years, where 80% of the people could have led you to Christ with biblical accuracy. Okay. They had a way of compartmentalizing God way far away from anything they actually did. So it would be really split off from their faith was split off from the rest of who they were. So you have a sexually driven style of infidelity that often is impersonal in its orientation, and the person is kind of oblivious to what it's doing to them because they think they can get away with it, and it's oblivious to their need to be honest with their spouse regarding that. All right. And then you have an infidelity that is created out of the beginning of an emotional affair. Okay. And this is where the individual hasn't been able um, to be themselves in a way that the knowing each other and being known process occurs within the marital connection, and so they go find someone else whereby that emotional sharing or discussion can occur. Often, maybe in a work environment where they agree and they accomplish some things together. But keep in mind, okay, again, that's an unreal, partially disconnected relationship because they're not dealing with the debt together. They're not dealing with the child problems together. And so there's a friendship that develops over a period of time, which then takes on a specialness, which then causes them to move into the direction of that sexual encounter that then solidifies the emotional affair with a physical connection in real time. And some of the most miserable people I have ever met, okay, are when that kind of friendship based affair becomes public. Because at that particular time, a decision has to be made. Now, a lot of times they'll talk about someday, we're going to get married, or someday this connection they have with their spouses will change. That's a fantasy. But at a certain point in time, when the debts are dealt with and real life comes crashing in, um, the ability to, you've had a part-time affair and you're moving now towards full-time, uh, a full-time connection with that person. And it doesn't always flow as well as they fantasize together it will be. And secondly, that where I've seen people the most miserable is they're deeply connected to their friend, and that's who they want to be with, but they're deeply connected to their spouse and their history, which they discover upon it being found out. Okay. And now they're caught in this wishbone. Do I head in this direction where I really don't know this person completely, and yet they're my best friend that I created over time? Or what do I do regarding the children, the finances, and this other individual that actually I liked a little more than I thought when it was hidden? And now it becomes excruciating, okay? Because a decision has to be made, and no matter what decision is made, somebody people are going to get hurt. And then what do we know about a person that gets divorced? Let's say they choose to get divorced, all right, as a result of the infidelity. I'm going to go this direction. I want a divorce. That has its easiness to it. Both positions have some obvious benefits. Now, we're not thinking here about what God wants. We're talking about
Right.
humanity here, okay?
Right.
And so eventually, every person that gets divorced says, this person is it. And I'm going to go with the person I had the affair with, not the person I'm married to, because the magic is gone, and I'm never going to get connected to another woman like my spouse or another man like my spouse. And yet, what do we know? The statistics go up the second time around
Yeah.
on divorce. Now, if
Yeah.
everybody's sure they're never going to make the same mistake twice, all right, and they're all saying it, what causes them to end up the second time making a mistake even more percentage likely? Reality is, we are the reason for the mistake. We are taking the problem, who is us, into the next relationship. And what we need to do is to figure out why I went over here to look at the grass is greener,
Mhm.
what I have to change about myself, and what do I need to share with the person I am committed to try to figure out what caused that divorce to take place on an emotional level. Dean, I said a lot. What are you thinking while I'm saying it?
Well,
And then Micah, you let her rip with more questions.
Yeah.
yeah. So I just had a couple do a marriage intensive this 2 weeks ago. Um, they met at work, had an affair, left their wife and husband for each other, and now their marriage is on the rocks. And they are struggling with guilt and shame. As Christians, they knew they shouldn't have done it, but they became overcome with their own needs and selfish needs and wants and desires and sexual fantasies. And soon after they got married, they realized this is not the fix. This is not the fix. They thought in their office affair that they were in heaven and that they were the perfect soulmates for each other. And there's a strange thing that happens with these emotional affair infidelity versus, like you said, just the sexual exercises. And one thing I've learned is when it's a man having a sexual affair, whether it's just because he wants his sexual needs met and he has no emotional connection, or if it's a long term, he's in love with somebody else and having sex with them. Women have told us it doesn't matter. Either way, it's a crushing blow to their ego and their trust and all of that. So infidelity is infidelity. Micah is still saying, I've chosen somebody over you. Um, Now, how does that heal? Okay. We teach couples that no matter what it is, forgiveness has to be given freely because we're forgiven in Christ. But forgiveness doesn't mean the person's getting away with it. Forgiveness doesn't mean you forget what happened. Forgiveness means that you release the power that unforgiveness has over you. You release it and you are open for reconciliation. Now, the second thing we say very quickly, because the offended spouse is now saying, what do you mean forgive? He broke my heart, he cheated on me, and he's begging to come back. And we say yes, and you need to forgive him. But trust has to be earned, drip by drip by drip by drip. And so infidelity is a supreme trust broken. Forgiveness has to happen quickly, but trust has to be earned over time. And that's kind of how we keep the accountability of rebuilding an infidelity experience.
Yeah. I'm going to let you guys into my brain for a second, which might be a dangerous spot.
It's scary.
Yeah. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of bring together what you said, Roy, and what you said, Dean, and then I'm going to ask a loaded question. So earlier, Dean, I had asked you the question related to is the perspective on infidelity something that you have to teach to couples or something that they come with? And then Roy was also talking about the different ways that infidelity can wreak havoc on a marriage. And I think that is a connecting piece of all different types of infidelity, is that they all have the ability to wreak havoc in different ways. But I'm curious, because I think the cultural perspective of infidelity is purely sexual, that's the primary understanding of what infidelity is. And with that, as well as the other types of infidelity, one, I'm curious, how do you interact with different types of infidelity, not just sexual, not just emotional, but of any nature? And how might that change if you're working with a male or a female client?
Roy, would you say that the sexual part of the infidelity is the most grievous experience that the offended spouse has? Or is that just maybe our perspective? Because I've had couples tell me that the emotional affair, in their mind, it was just like that spouse had a sexual affair in their mind because they still chose somebody over their spouse. But do you find that the sexual affair becomes the end all, bottom line, it's time to leave, you can't reconcile?
No, I think it may be at some point an important nail in the coffin. Okay. But I also think it's partially how the couple defined their relationship prior to the infidelity. Okay. And it has to do with expectations and how God is a part of what they're
Right.
trying to accomplish together,
Right.
and how much that they worked on it. Okay. If you have a simplistic view of marriage, then you can have a simplistic affair, and it really, the couple themselves isn't attached at a wide variety of levels. Um, because keep in mind, we want intimacy, and yet emotional intimacy, and we're scared to death of it.
Right.
And some individuals themselves, in their own identity, ignore their own emotional journey, so they don't grow up within themselves, so they're going to feel less actively hurt in with certain types of infidelity, because they didn't even assume that they would be number one. If you grew up in a
Yeah.
family, and let's say women are dominated, and the woman buys into that perspective because she had a dominating father, okay, and then she's with a man and he goes to dominate her, to her, this imbalance is just the way it is. That this is the way men are, or this is the way I, this is our lot in life from a feminine perspective.
Mhm.
Well, in that kind of connection, there were disruptions in the nature of the attachment at a number of different levels. So it may be, hey, you had sex, that's what makes the difference. In other relationships that are more well developed, or where emotionality and sharing and about our past, our present, the sharing of dreams together, when you realize that all that was done and there was a healthy physical connection that reaffirmed that, and now suddenly that person was doing this on the side, it it was like, wow, I thought all these levels of intimacy existed, and they didn't. It was more levels of distrust um, existed than I was aware of. Now that the list of the person that's been harmed is quite big, and so it takes a lot longer under the drip drip trust Dean method, as you said, which is good, for that to return.
Yeah, and a lot of times, not just men, but a lot of times men will give up before the woman decides to trust them again because they have a microwave mentality. We have a 15-week follow-up to the intensive. And a lot of times the guys will do the 15 weeks and they'll say, okay, so now we can start having sex again. Now you've forgiven me of my affair and everything's fine. And the wife just says, you got to be kidding. I have no trust in you at all. And the guy says, well, I've been doing great for 15 weeks. Why can't you trust me? And, it's that lack of understanding of what true trust is that both spouses have to understand. And it's a complete surrender to being safe with that person again and letting your heart be theirs again. And if they want to, they can crush it again. And depending on where those people are coming from, their backgrounds, you're exactly right, Roy. Their heart was crushed many times before they got married, so they entered a marriage with, you know I'm probably going to get my heart crushed, and then it happens, and it doesn't affect them as much because they're so sad already. But when two healthy people get together and one of them becomes unhealthy and goes off and has an affair, oh, it's an incredible blow to that person. If it's the first time their heart's been crushed, it's a very sad thing to see. And very often they're unable to come back to a full trust of that person. They may reconcile and stay married, but I've been working with a couple of couples for 2 years, and they're together in civil, but she just can't trust them at all because that was her first time, which is kind of rare, right? Because if you live till 20, 25 years old, you're probably going to have your heart crushed a couple times. Um, but for those that don't, it's a very that first moment is very debilitating.
And to me, to get through infidelity, there's some good books out there. Torn Asunder is one of them off the top of my head. Private Lies is another one that's not necessarily biblically based in its orientation, but it help the couple think about some of the underlying causes of what created the divorce. The divorce happens before the divorce, okay? And what 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 concerns me, okay, and this doesn't say then go get divorced because you're divorced emotionally, but what concerns me is, if the Bible talks about God understanding our spirit.
Mhm.
God is tuned in to the deeper view of how humanity relates to each other and how humanity relates to him. Okay. And it's sad to me how many times that we say we're married, and yet I say to God, God, are you saying right now I'm married to Jan? Yes, I'm married. Okay, but if Jesus was anything, he saw beyond the law or behind the rules how we humans manipulate the rules the way we want them to do because ultimately we believe we're God,
Yeah.
right? That's the big problem here. And God says, no, no, you're not God. I'm God. Okay. And I'm going to measure the heart. All right. And when your heart is mutual, when your heart is respectful to the other person, when your heart is sacrificial towards the other person, when your heart is is sensitive to what their pain they're carrying is, okay, you're married. Okay, you're married. And when your heart isn't these things, are you married? Yes, you are mechanically, legally married. But if you look at what I want for you, my son and daughter, okay, I don't want you being mechanically married, okay, because I know what marriage is. And if the mutuality, if the sensitivity, if all these other things that we talk about doesn't exist, you know, God is not mocked. God's not a happy camper with what we're selling here. The church may buy it, okay? I will tell you the Christian kids at home who are living with it and then don't stay with the church when they get old enough to go because they don't want to support the pretense that they grew up with. They know their parents aren't married, okay, the way they define it, all right? And if you said to them, would you want to have a marriage like your parents? I was a youth director for years. Most of the kids wouldn't say what I see in my marriage, in my parents' Christian marriage, is necessarily the way I want it. I want it better than that. And so we have to keep in mind that there's marriage the way we define it, and then there's marriage the way God defines it, and God defines it as as has a standard of beauty in that human connection that he wants to empower us to achieve that over a period of time, individually and collectively, as we walk with him. But it's going to take some time to do it. And we get so stuck in the cheap substitute
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
it's not good.
No, not at all.
Dean, you said something earlier that really stuck out, and I appreciated it. And it was the way that you described how trust is rebuilt, that drip by drip mentality. And I think that that's a helpful mindset to have because I think sometimes people come to broken trust as a way of I only did one thing, so it should only take one thing for me to refill it. Um,
Yes.
it's problematic, but I think sadly it's true. And I think with that it's like as you guys have shared really difficult to build that trust back not only in a spouse or significant other but also just in other people in general. Like you experience a brokenness that you don't expect from someone that you are incredibly vulnerable with.
Mhm.
How do you then rebuild that level of trust or that connection with someone who you were less vulnerable with?
Yeah. Yeah, you're exactly right. And one of the things we teach couples is we have a forgiveness section. And as we teach through the forgiveness section, we say, when you forgive somebody, they're not getting away with it. This earning their trust is is what both of you need to be a part of. And if there's a offending spouse and an offended spouse, and that offending spouse is broken and humble and wants to earn that trust back, but the offended spouse says, no, I will not forgive you. I will keep you in unforgiveness prison. I will lock the door and I will hold the key in front of you the rest of your life. And that's a true hell marriage. Um, and so until God intervenes and breaks the hard heart of that person who understands without forgiveness, their relationship with God is affected if they're not going to forgive that offending spouse. And so that's how important forgiveness is, that it can even impact your relationship with God if you don't forgive that spouse. But then the trust has to be earned, and it has to be earned that one drip at a time. And I love your idea of, but I took out the trash and I didn't get on porn tonight and I was with her this Saturday night. What more does she want? And that's a person then that we need to take through coaching and counseling because they really don't understand this whole relationship thing. When you break somebody's heart, you can't unbreak it. They have to give that heart back to you. You try to earn it back, but they've got to give it back to you. So yeah, I tell couples, whichever offending spouse has said, this is your time to become the best you can become. This is not your time to try to earn their trust, because they'll see through that. But if they see you becoming a better man, a better woman, a more humble, broken person, walking with Christ, telling them what you're learning about God and what you're learning about what it means to be a holy, righteous person. And if they see you taking activities that are people centered and less self centered, if they see you turning off the media and not playing the video games in order to better yourself in some other area, it's all those actions that show them you could be trustworthy, because words don't mean a thing. It's actions.
And look, from my perspective, and I'm not in anywhere way judging, saying that an affair is okay. Okay, I see it as a kind of a self-centered, self-destructive, other destructive act choice. Okay, that is not in keeping with what God wants. All right, however, okay, it is not likely that infidelity comes out of a mutually beneficial, hot, spiritually, sexually, emotional relationship. Okay, that this doesn't just, we're together really tight, marriage as God defines marriage, not just the paperwork, and then suddenly there's an affair. Okay,
Yes.
it doesn't happen.
No.
Okay, there is a series of communications that are occurring that both on some level affirm or don't work through enough, or that person is just saying, I'm going in this direction. The other person's chasing, they're scared, they sense things aren't going, but the person has, because of addictive issues or whatever, not willing to be connected. That's when these things are most likely to occur. It's not on a scale of 1 to 10, a 10 marriage where everything is perfect and they went into the water with no splash. All right. And then suddenly 3 weeks later, there's an affair.
Yeah.
The affair is usually under, unless it's a impulsive sexual act, it occurs over a period of time. It might be a one night stand, but there are a lot of elements of disconnection that both of the participants should feel, and some do feel it and know they're losing that person, but it's not hot and then cold.
One of the hardest things for couples to deal with is when we go through the spouse responsibility part of the intensive, where we actually bring this up and we say whether the offending spouse or the offended spouse, you both had a part in where this marriage is. And many times the offended spouses will say, "Are you kidding me? She had the affair. She cheated on me. She went out." And we try to get them to say, "But did you have anything that pushed them away, that made yourself unemotionally available, that turned off sexual relationships, holding sex hostage, as couples do sometimes? Did any of that give them the wrong idea that they could find that elsewhere?" And many times when the offended spouse is humble enough to say, "Oh my gosh, you're right. I have a responsibility in this marriage as well," then they actually become our best recovery people, because now they both feel responsible to make the marriage work again. So it's getting that mutual responsibility acknowledgement in the midst of an infidelity that's really critical to moving a couple ahead.
And it's never a justification. We're not saying
Never.
affairs are justified, but we're
Right.
saying that it's an explanation. It's how the couple together created an environment where that choice was more likely to occur. That never justifies the choice, but we have to look at that environment, because if that environment is the same environment the couple's going to go back to, all right, then the same results are likely to occur. Ultimately, what has to happen is that the relationship, basically, to me, when there's an affair involved in the relationship, it's a D, it's an F on the report card. So going back and doing the exact same thing that got you the D and the F on your report card is not moving forward. It is, how can we create, I don't want the marriage to come back. I want, how can you be married in a completely different way, so that this option just does is not only horrifying to you, an affair, it is not an option for you based on the choices that you have built in together. It's you would both lose too much to even think about it.
Dean, I wanna push on something a little bit that you said earlier. Not because I disagree, because I think there's a little bit more to hear from it. You had mentioned the importance when it comes to rebuilding trust of forgiveness. And I think you are exactly right in understanding that forgiveness is crucial. But I also think that if forgiveness is forced, it can cause more damage than good. So how do you work with a couple to get them to the point when they're ready to forgive? Not necessarily ready in the sense that it feels comfortable to do that,
Yes.
but ready in the sense is it's time.
That's a great question. Um, I'll do the microcosm and the macro. The microcosm of forgiveness in a couple is, I do something that defends my spouse. And because we have a healthy enough responsibility, she can say to me, "I don't know if you realize, but Tuesday night we were in talking to people and you said something about me that minimalized me. It it made me look to your friends, to your men friends, like I was, an idiot. And I had no idea. I did not know I was hurting her." And I say, "I am so sorry. I know that hurt you." And then the most important part is to say, "Will you forgive me?" Now she is responsible to respond to my apology, to assess it if it's, a real, because men or women know you don't mean it when you say, "Hey, I'm sorry about that." And you never say, "Will you forgive me?" That's the most important part of restoring our day-to-day brokenness in our relationships. We do it all the time. We hurt each other all the time. We don't want to. I want to hurt Nancy less this year than I did last year, but I'm still going to hurt her. And as we become more sensitive and more trusting of each other, she can tell me, and I can tell her when she's hurt me. But then on the big macro infidelity, broken trust, how do I rebuild that? You're very, very right. We tell the spouses, you cannot make your spouse forgive you. You can't. You cannot make them forgive you. All you can do is be the best follower of Christ you can, to live your life in a way that's completely different than you were living, like to your point, Roy. And then you have to trust God to work in their heart, so that the way you're living your life, the way you're being this new person, will begin to stimulate them, because God gives them this responsibility in this relationship. So they see it, they see it, they see it. And they know they have to forgive, but you can't make them forgive. So that forgiveness comes when that person says, I've seen enough of what you're doing, and I need to release the pain you caused me. I need to let it go. And I need to let that pain you caused me go. And I need to learn to trust you again. Does that make sense? That big moment that the offending spouse has no control of, and they need to know they have no control of that.
And to me, it um, is it, will you forgive or not? Okay, maybe a question that too soon to ask. It's, are you willing to go on the journey to
Yes.
forgive me?
Yes.
Okay, because if somebody says, I forgave you, and then they you have to have all of them go along with this decision, and they can't. Okay, it's dishonest. I can say, I'm going to begin the journey of over time eating the pain that you can't help me with, regarding what pain you gave me by your choice. Okay, but to be able to say, the only options to create that quickly is I minimize the pain, or I split the pain off from me, and try to pretend like that pain doesn't exist. God wants you to bring that pain over a period of time. Now, look, some people can immediately quit smoking, and boom, it's quick. Other times, it's like Jesus healing the person, and he says, I see people walking like trees, and then it gets clear. So, and most of the time, due to how we humans are, okay, it's a journey to forgive. Um, are you committed to go on a journey to forgive me? Yes, I'm committed to go on a journey to forgive you. I need time to get me, all of me, on that journey.
Right.
And part of that me is, look, there's a difference between me forgiving and me restoring the relationship.
Yes.
I have to forgive because God told me to forgive, and God, as the author of humanity, knows forgiveness is freeing to me.
Yes.
Otherwise, you control me the rest of your life. So I've got to forgive, because God doesn't give me a choice on that one.
Mm-hmm.
His will is clear. You forgive. He gives us time to forgive. The next is restore. All right. And restoring a relationship requires that I am sure that the person that harmed me hasn't a proclivity to keep harming me constantly in the same way. When Jesus did not let people abuse him. All right. And what makes it so important, his prayer, not my will, but thine be done, is Jesus wasn't masochistic and said, this will be a delight. I'm God. I can withstand this cross because I'm God. This will be a walk in the park. Jesus clearly said, I am not going to allow these humans to abuse me unless, Father, you tell me And then it's not masochistic. At that moment, it's heroic, where Jesus, as our hero, gives of his life so we have alternatives that otherwise we wouldn't have because our sin would defeat us. And now our sin is something that we all know about, even when we hide it, but victory is ultimately ours.
I think people experience that in this infidelity forgiveness process. They think that through that, Jesus forgave me with all of my infidelity and all of my pride and all of my ego. And I think when you consider how forgiven you are, then your spirit moves towards forgiveness of everybody in your life because of how forgiving you are. But that spouse couple, that trust and that restoration, that's what takes so much time. Did that answer your question, Micah?
Yeah, no, I think that was great. And Roy, you said something, another thing that stuck out to me, and that the couples that find themselves struggling with infidelity, it's not something that just pops up, that just appears. It's a struggle, it's a process, and it's a pattern. And
It's something they achieved question mark together.
sure, sure, sure. And I'm curious because we also shared a little bit how with infidelity comes power struggle and struggle with balance. Um, in the sense that there may be one spouse or one member of a relationship that feels that they're the only one that's fighting for what's left. What support do you offer to an individual who finds themselves as the only one who's fighting for a relationship?
That's a great question. We get it all the time. Um, Many times, the offending spouse will drag the offended spouse, literally drag them to the intensive because they're repentant, they're broken, they're repentant, they hate what they did, their eyes are open and they want to restore, but the wound is so difficult. The offended spouse says, "No, I can't go on the journey yet." And we know if we can get them here, we know that God can start that restoration process. But some of the most difficult spouses are the ones that the one spouse gets them there. And when they share about their marriage crisis, they say, "Well, I'm here because she wanted me to come. I think we got a pretty good relationship." And it's heinous relationship, but somehow the guy thinks we're doing okay. We fight now and then, and so there's that disconnect. I think so many times in spouses that they just don't know how bad it is and how much it needs to be restored, and so they just go through the marriage in total chaos and hurting each other all the time, thinking that this is the best it can be, until one spouse gives up, and then when that spouse gives up, it's pretty much over. Until restoration comes again.
I think your question uh, has a lot of implications to it, Micah. So I'm going to say something and then you ask it again. All right. Um, and Dean help remind me of this. A lot of times, the person who's been offended, okay, who struggles with forgiving their partner, and rightfully so, on some level.
Mhm.
I sure didn't have that happen to me. And when someone punches you in the gut, I'm not sure what the right way to handle being punched in the gut is. Okay. And I'm not sure God says you smile and to let the person punch you in the gut. All right. But when I look at it, a lot of times the person that struggles forgiving their spouse for being unfaithful, all right, is struggling with forgiving themselves. And they can't, underneath the lack of forgiveness to their spouse, okay, which needs to be looked at, there is an underlying lack of forgiveness for themselves. Okay. They weren't assertive. They didn't draw a line in the sand saying, if you keep drinking, the affair with drinking is going to eventually equal an affair physically with somebody while you're drinking. And so they, on some level, despite how legitimately hostile they are towards the other person that offended them, there is an unconscious or a less realized hostility towards themselves. And once they work through some of their own self-doubt, and where they're able to say, I this what that person did was wrong, and it's not just defiable, but here's what I can do different the next time. So that does the story doesn't go the same exact way. Now there's a better chance for them to eventually forgive the other person, but they're not going to forgive the other person at the depth they need to if there's some things they hold themselves accountable for, uh, regarding being unable to stand up for themselves in a positive, godly, aggressive style and say, "This is what I need from you." You've instead they've let them kind of go their way until it got so big, and now I have to deal with it. All right, and this is especially true for um, from my experience. I work with more male sex addicts than female sex addicts. Are there female sex addicts? The answer is yes. Okay. But the males, okay, have this compulsive style of being unfaithful. All right. And the relationships that have had the best forgiveness, as I've observed it or how I can measure it, I'm not God, and the more likelihood that compulsive sexuality stops is when the woman grows through what happened, looks at her part of the dance, is ticked at him for his part of the dance, sets healthy boundaries, forgives him, and says, if you ever enter that world again, there is no restoration. Okay. So that there's a line. The first time I was clueless, and there were ways that together I can see nothing that justifies it, but how I was part of the dance. But God has not set me up for continual abuse. This is what I'm going to do. I will forgive you, but I will also be a different me who has a standard that I will stick by that says, I will never be abused again by you in these ways. And that is the best chance where when I would say to men in my group, what happens if you get caught with a prostitute again, or child pornography again, or an affair with a person at work again? Okay. And when he said, my marriage is over, what we created is really, really good. I never would want that to end. And when they have that perspective that they've grown through together, that makes the best chance that he does the rest of his life what's right, as well as she's basically saying, here's the standard, nothing left. We're never going to go back there again. And reality is, even as a therapist, okay, if I help somebody work through a child molestation, let's say the worst case scenario, all right, that we would say, and now there's a restoration. If in therapy they go back and abuse another child after we did everything to make sure that wouldn't happen, okay, then that's it. Okay, it's there's nothing else can be done. She has every right, if she comes back and forgives and does everything, okay, and it still doesn't work. What else can next time? Well, next time it's a different month. Next time I'm a year older. Next time you've worked through everything. You've forgiven. You've rebuilt things. If it keeps happening, it's she has to take care of herself. That man can harm her with disease, and harm her legally and financially and can harm someone she loves by acting out, she has no other choice but to separate in a way that protects her and her children.
Roy, you
Yeah.
didn't ask the question again. Do you want me to still ask the question?
I did, tell me if we got close to answering it. If not, we'll try again.
I think we answered a good bit of it. I'm happy to ask it again though. For the individual who feels as though they are the only one fighting for their marriage, what advice would you have for them? What would you say to them?
I
we
would
have
say,
this. Yeah, go ahead. I'll let you answer because
no, go ahead.
I've had this happen many times where couples say, I want it, she doesn't want it. She wants it, he doesn't want it. And what is our advice? Our advice is become the very best you can become. Become the best father, the best friend, the best Christ follower, the best person, and trust God for where they are on their journey. And because you can't control it, you can't make them want to restore the relationship. You can't scream and yell and cry because that just repulses them. You have to become this person who has a transformational experience with God, and it will reflect itself in everything you do. And then you've got to trust this person because it's not about I'm going to be a really good Christian if they come back to me. I'm going to really be a good dad if they come back to me. I'm going to really follow God if they come back to me. And then 9 months later, you're following God and they don't come back to you. So now you're crushed and it's like, God, you let me down. I had this deal with you. And God says, you didn't have a deal with me. I'm not a transactional relationship. I'm a transformational relationship. So when you look at restoration, it's not a transactional relationship. I'll do these things and then you'll forgive me, right? And they say, nope, I'm done. I'm out of here. And I've got a couple right now. She's left and he's waiting. And he says, what do I do? I said, trust your life to God. Be the best father of those kids you can be. Be the best businessman, the best Christ follower, and trust her to God. He says, even if that means she leaves, I said, yes, because it's not about this transactional thing. But I've also seen that mentality draw the offended spouse back to the new person this person's becoming. Because that's what they wanted all along. They always wanted a man or a woman that will love them and care for them and be trustworthy and be part of the journey with them. So now this person is changing into maybe that person they could come back and do the journey with. So I just tell them, be the best you, hang in there, trust God.
From my perspective, and I think that that's great advice and affirm everything Dean said. Oftentimes, what's dysfunctional in the marriage has to change the old marriage versus the new marriage. And the old marriage has a percentage of dependency that the biggest competitor to true love is dependency. And so there's a nature of a couple that's dependent. And a lot of times the spouse that's walking away can can bet on based on the history with that relationship and how it expresses itself that their spouse will be dependent and can't be independent from them. And that's what allows them to walk away because at any time they want to come back, they're pretty sure that person is going to be there for them.
Yeah.
And there's something demeaning about that person to that person for that person to take them for granted, and there's something demeaning for that person to allow themselves to be taken for granted or not say, look, for you to come back to me, you need to prove to me I am valuable. Okay. And they're so panicked at trying to cling, okay, that they don't make the person answer the value question before they take them back. All right. And so, what I would say to that person is it is an honorable pursuit to try to have your marriage work, and God, within the realm of free will, would like to bless that. I would then affirm what Dean said about them living in a godly manner, and there's plenty of biblical references to support that. But what then I would also say along with that is what happens, okay, if God doesn't give you that, okay? And how are you going to handle disconnected from that person? What do you have to do to have a godly life as you and God define it outside of that relationship? And what I'm trying to do is build up, get them ready to adapt to a reality that may be theirs, while at the same time, okay, if I can get them to do that and they grow that way with God, that other person will feel the disconnection, okay, that they're moving on in some ways. I want you to be married to you. The price is you have to treat me respectfully with dignity and tell me I'm valued. And here's what we don't tolerate in our relationship. And if having a connection with me, okay, is you believe can be done any other way, it's not going to happen. And so it's to build them up and to try to fortify them through the valley of the shadow that they're in, and say that God wants to help you be you, but God doesn't want you in a loveless marriage. Okay. And it's not helpful for you to cling to someone who, from a Matthew 18 perspective, continues to harm you. You need to set boundaries. And what do we need to mourn together? How can you get support for people in your mourning process if that doesn't come around, so that the relationship isn't clung to out of dependency, and a new bond, if it ever is formed, okay, because it won't be the same way if she's willing or he's willing to accept that I'm running and I'm not coming back. Eventually, if I come back, I have to have a new bond, because the other person, by being able to say that bond is no longer going to keep us together, I'm not going to act like a fool. I'm not going to chase you for love. Okay. Love is what you choose to give me or what you don't choose to give me. And so I would really work on that person individually to cut the dependency bond as they became who they were meant to be in Christ, and hope that's enough.
I'm gonna ask another question that may have tension behind it, may not. We'll see once we get there. um, I think nowadays we live in a world that a cultural perception of marriage is appealing, in the sense that it's really easy to meet your immediate needs. That there's very specifically as men, that it's very there's very little need to connect emotionally, that you can meet your need and move on, meet your need and move on. And I'm curious, with the appeal that that might have to a lot of people, what is the appeal to a godly style of marriage? What draws us back to that?
Well, I got to send you to a book uh, called Get Married.
Okay.
Just came out. This statistician guy, he does a beautiful job in a section there. It says the Gen Xers and how they look at marriage and relationships and sexual exercise versus intimacy. And that whole question was asked, and his statistics show that that your body, your mind, your soul is better when you're in a committed marriage relationship versus a living together. And it's just, and he does it without emotions or Bible verses. He just interviewed millions of people, and he found that the ones living together had a whole different life, health wise and mental wise and emotional wise, and the ones committed to marriage, we're better off. And if you read that book, it's I think it's Brad Wilcox, Get Married. It's a great book. It's not begging. It's just saying, hey, here's the statistics. Cultures are better when people are married. Families are better. Your financial outlook is better when you're married. Your health is better when you're married. And it's worth the hard work to get and stay married. So that's how I'd answer that, to look at that book, to understand statistically, just take the spiritual side away. God designed marriage. He knew what he was doing. It works across all cultures and all feedback. It works. And it has, up until this current culture has challenged it, but they challenged it in the 60s. They challenged it in the 20s. They challenged it in the 1800s. The enemy's always challenging God's design and trying to get man to think that there's a better design. And then they try it and then it fails. And then they come back to God's design. So that would be my answer.
Thanks, Dean.
We all struggle with our definition of ourselves, and we all are like St. Paul, the things I want to do, I don't do. And the things I don't want to do, I do, and whatever, both of them. And to me, uh, God has a high view for the merging process of a couple. The sexuality affirms the couple, but he wants them to merge on an emotional level. He wants them to merge on a mental level. He wants them to merge at a relational level. And you don't hear me say spiritual level, because the physical, emotional, mental, and relational level are the spiritual level. In other words, everything is of interest to God. God wants that couple on all the levels to be able to connect up and grow and become strong. And I think there's an inherent need each of us as individuals have in the quietness of our own hearts that says, boy, I wish somebody knew me, and I wish someone had appreciated me. I don't think we're actually saying, I wish that person saw me as perfect, because if they did, we would know that they didn't know us, right?
Yes.
Right. We would know they're buying into a lie, and that would kind of make way more important our imperfection than it has to be. And I think that by including God in the relationship, you have each individual in the couple has a source outside of themselves and outside of the other person in the relationship that will fuel them for that getting to know each other and being known process. And I think we hunger for that, especially in a culture where we text, where everything is streaming. Okay, and it's really hard to be personal, and yet we want somebody to be personal with us. And God is sitting there, no matter what level of discouragement we are in our marriage, saying, I want a personal relationship with you so I can help you have a personal relationship with him or her. And so that's why that kind of connection is the only route to go. And that's why the statistics are what Dean says, because if the statistics, if the connection is one level of attachment, it is fueling and adaptive, because they can get through the ups and downs in the different stages of life. And when it's not like that, it gets pretty it can get pretty miserable married. Dean, we're about to go. I need to wrap up here in a second. Is there anything you want to say on our way out?
I wish everybody happy Thanksgivings. These can be good times and hard times. The older I get, the more of my friends are spending some time mourning the loss of loved ones and Thanksgiving, and I think that's important to be able to sit with the sadness as well as the joy of families getting together. And I think a lot of times couples can get stressed out by the performance they think they have to give at their Thanksgiving Day event. So I would tell people, just relax, take a deep breath, find somebody that you can enjoy at that meeting. Avoid the crazy uncle if you think they're going to ruin your day, and just enjoy family. We live in a tough world right now, this side of heaven. And when you have somebody you know is on your side, as imperfect as they are, man, grab them and hold on to them. So I hope everybody has a blessed Thanksgiving.
Micah, thank you for the great questions and your contribution. We begin what we do with a reading, and we're going to end it with a reading because I think there's something important about the ritual of us recognizing what we're doing and why we're doing it. So we need to wrap up our podcast for today. But the good news is Jesus continues to finish his good work within you. We're not alone on this deal. As he transforms, you'll be when he as he transforms you, you'll begin to see life's biggest challenges as holy moments, acknowledging our sinful choices, our emotional struggles, and relational difficulties is not an easy task. Today's holy moment prompts us to reflect closely on our responsibilities, allowing us collectively to seek God's strength for change. Please feel free to invite anyone you know who might benefit from these types of discussions. May God bless you with the strength to practice Ephesians 4, 2, and 3 daily. Listen to what this verse says. It starts off with a fairly big challenge. Always be humble and gentle. Be patient with each other, making allowance for each other's faults because of your love. Make every effort to keep yourself united in spirit, binding yourselves together with peace. Remember, God is quite the conversationalist, so talk and listen to God today. God bless.